Good morning, Jessica. I don't know, can you hear me? Can you see me?
Good morning, Dawn. We can see your slides, and I believe we can see you.
Oh, great. Perfect. I guess I'll just wait until it's 9:35.
All right, Dawn, you're on.
Excellent. Thank you. So good morning. My name is Dawn Fish. Thank you for inviting me to join you for a little bit today. I have been with the Department of the Navy Office of Civilian Human Resources in various different positions and capacities for almost 25. This will be my 25th year this year. So I may have spoken with some of you or worked with some of you in the past. I've spent the last 3 years in the policy department at OCHR headquarters. So I have a new perspective from the policy side, and I'm really happy to be invited to join you today. Okay, so let's just jump right in here. Okay, so because I'm an HR professional, I'm pretty programmed to start every conversation about HR that I ever have with strategic outreach because it's really a key driver in successful recruiting, and it's one of the few areas of HR that OCHR, my organization, we are not responsible for. We don't we don't really do strategic outreach. Strategic outreach is something that the command, the HRO, the hiring manager, they do their
Dawn,
own.
sound dropped for a second. If you could pause for 1 second. Sorry about that.
Sure.
Yeah, we can't hear you very loudly right now. It got really quiet. I'm not sure if something could have possibly changed on your end.
Oh. Uh, you mean you started out being able to hear me and now you can't?
Yeah, you're just really quiet now.
Oh no, no, I didn't touch anything.
No, I may hear you online. I think it's something in the room. Give us 1 moment.
Okay.
Test, 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 test. Even the microphone, even on the
You mean
microphone, it's
me?
not coming through.
Oh.
Hey, Dawn, just give us just a sec. We're troubleshooting here. Thank you.
That's okay. That's okay.
Test, test, test. Hello. Is this one louder than that one?
Test, test, test.
Yeah.
test. Speaking again.
Feedback. You might want to take the laptop away from that speaker there because it will feedback.
Oh, I think we're getting feedback there, though.
That's going to feedback.
Plug your
Well,
laptop.
now what they're trying. Okay. So first things first, I'm going to turn down that mic because that's going to feedback and not work. They're trying to play something.
Hey, Dawn, can you say something?
You want to do test? I think that was me.
Yeah. So you need to kill your mic. You're feeding back.
I was just putting it on the test. He's just
No, no,
testing.
no. Let's talk to her on the other end. So kill yourself. Kill your mic. Check, check. Hey, Dawn, can you hear me over there?
I can hear you.
Perfect. Okay, so just talk to me for a minute. Tell me your name, rank, and whatever number.
Okay. My
Just
name
any.
is Dawn Fish, GS15 OCHR.
Okay, I don't know what that means, but it sounds good. All right,
Ah!
we're good. We've got everything we need. Thank you. Stand by. Appreciate your time.
Okay. Let me know when to start.
Okay, it works now, so let's just do it. Thanks. Thanks for coming in. All right, we should be good to go to start again, Dawn. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for your
Okay,
patience.
great. You know what? Yeah, no problem. You know what's great about this? I was going to skip this slide anyway, so I'm going to move over to slide 2. Also, I'm a naturally fast talker, so I think we'll be fine. We'll still get through this. So, all right, let's talk about how IT managers and IT hiring managers should be hiring. First, I want to talk quickly about students and recent grads. Students and recent grads, fantastic source of talent. And I'm a hiring manager myself, so I recognize that sometimes we do want to put a seasoned journey level person in every position, but building the bench is really important for all of us. So let's talk about the DoD DHA. You've probably already aware of this, but I just kind of want to go over some of the benefits that you have available to you. With the DoD DHA for students and recent grads, you can do non-competitive name requests. That means you don't have to ask OCHR or your HRO to put an announcement on USA Jobs for you. You can go to universities, colleges, anywhere where you can find students or recent grads. You can actually conduct on the spot interviews of students at these career fairs. And when you find that student or recent grad that would be a perfect match for your team, you can make on the spot job offers when using this DoD DHA. You don't have to apply veterans preference when you're at the university or at the job fair. They're going to get an appointment in the competitive service. It is probably one of the fastest, best, most streamlined ways of bringing new talent on board. There are some limitations, of course, as I've listed on the screen. The biggest limitation that you have with this DHA is that we are limited. The Department of Defense gives the Navy a certain amount every year that we're allowed to use, and then we disperse those allocations out across the major commands. So you will want to get with your HRO and just find out how many allocations that you have to work with. If you run out of allocations, and I urge you to use this until you run out, but if you do run out, we have the OPM Pathways program. And yes, you do have to have an announcement on USA Jobs when you use the Pathways program, but that's okay. You're still allowed to go to the university, colleges, wherever you find great IT talent, and you can still meet with the students. You can still conduct on-the-spot interviews. Just try to coincide your announcement on USA Jobs with the job fair, and maybe have the link to the announcement in your flyers or your business cards. Even though the OPM Pathways programs isn't as flexible because you have to use an announcement, you have to select them off of a cert. One of the cool things about the OPM Pathways program is it's not limited to bachelor degrees or higher. You can use this to hire high school students, VOTEC students, and as somebody that's been in the HR world for 25 years now, don't sleep on the high school students and the VOTEC students. You can hire them. There's no degree requirement for 2210. And I can't tell you how many brilliant finds you will find straight out of high school or even in the VOTEC schools. I'm going to quickly move on to the next slide. Okay, now let's talk about incentive options. What incentive options do you have? Well, everybody knows about the 3 R's. You have your recruitment, your relocation, your retention. You can actually spend quite a bit on these incentives, up to 25% of the salary multiplied by the number of years in your service agreement. Recruitment incentives, obviously, those are for people outside the federal government. Relocation incentives, that's for outside the federal government or even current federal employees. And then obviously your retention incentives are for your current staff. You generally do have to use a service agreement if you want to do a big lump sum payment, if you just want them to just get one big lump sum check. But you can, if there was some reason why you wanted to avoid a service agreement, you can avoid the service agreement entirely by choosing to do a bi-weekly payout of whatever the incentive amount is. So then you don't even need a service agreement. And you can do group incentives. So for example, if you have a division of 5 or 6 people that do something very specialized, and you have very good reason to believe that you can lose them to the private sector because maybe there's a big presence of that in your area, you can do a group incentive of up to 10%. It's not 25%, it's 10% for group incentives, but we can get waivers for you from OPM to offer higher percentages. In fact, currently right now in the Navy, we have group incentives for our firefighters at 16%. And what else did we just do? Oh, we recently got approval from OPM to offer 50% relocation incentives to anybody willing to go to Guam. So it's absolutely possible to go higher than these percentages when you need to. Highest previous rate, obviously that's just offering higher than the step 1 to somebody that is a current federal employee or previous federal employee. Advance in higher rate is basically the same thing. It's offering higher than the step 1, but this time it's to somebody you're pulling in from the private sector. Leave accrual credit. I think the leave accrual credit is not used nearly enough. I will say that I do see a lot of use of the advance in higher pay setting. So good on you for using that. Well done. But I'm not seeing as much leave accrual credit used. And that's a really great negotiating tool, because even though there are some instances where we can't compete with private sector salaries, in the private sector, the leave accrual rate is almost never as good as what we're offering. And the fact that we can offer even more using their private sector experience, this is a good tool. So don't sleep on that one either. And then obviously student loan repayment. Everyone knows about student loan repayment. Of course, it does require a service agreement, but that can be very helpful, especially when you're going to the universities and colleges career fairs to talk about paying off their student loans. Okay, now I just talked about the incentives really quick, but I kind of want to dive a little bit deeper into retention incentives, because of the 3 R's, it's the retention incentives that's used the least, which surprises me because I feel that I would probably use it the most. So I put this slide together to just sort of try to paint a picture of where I see retention incentives can be helpful. So for example, something I hear a lot from IT managers is that it's hard to keep their staff. They're constantly being recruited by the private sector and wooed away for higher salaries, and that the IT managers that are in CES commands and the cyber accepted service commands, they don't have that problem because they have the targeted local market supplements. But there are ways where you can even beat the targeted local market supplement if you strategically use your retention incentives. So in the example that I'm showing you here, for the same 2 employees, one is just a Title V GS employee like me or some of you, and the other one is a GG in the CES. The Title V employee, if you're in Seattle, last year you're getting 30.81%, but the TLMS was 45%. So granted, it is more. As you can see, 141,191 is more than the salary the Title V employee was getting. But as an IT manager, you have the option of offering your employee a retention incentive up to 25%. And in this case, it would only require a 15% retention incentive to put them all the way up to 146,000, more than even the CES employee is getting with their TLMS. So I recognize that this is just one example of one kind of position in one locality, and it's going to look differently depending on what kind of position it is and what part of the country it's in. But I just want to put this in your head to think about and to maybe talk to your HRO about. So if you have a situation where you have some IT specialists that are highly valuable and you simply just can't afford to lose, please consider exercising retention incentives. Now, the last thing I want to say about that is it's very important that the command is supportive of paying for incentives. I encourage anybody who's listening, if you're in a position where you're part of your budget for incentives. It's crucial. If you're an IT manager, advocate to your leadership how important it is every year when they're setting for the next year to include to set aside part of the labor budget, because it would come out of your labor, for retention incentives, because just because it can be such a valuable and effective retention tool. Okay, see, we're just chugging along because I talk so fast. Okay, appointment options. I want to talk about appointment options. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because currently, right now, today, if you're a hiring manager in IT in the Department of Navy, you have what is the best appointing authority I have ever seen in 25 years of HR, and that is the DoD Direct Hire Authority for certain personnel. If I was an IT manager, I would use this. I would use nothing but this. I would use this all of the time. This DoD DHA is so incredible. it's not available to me. It doesn't apply to HR. I'm a hiring manager, but I can't use it. I'm a little jealous of how great this tool is for you. So let's talk about it. Number one, you don't have to announce your positions on USA Jobs if you use this DHA. Number two, any of your cyber workforce positions can be hired using this DHA as long as it's designated with a work role code. It doesn't matter what series it is. As long as there's a work role code assigned, you can use this DHA. Any grade level, GS15 or below. Here's some really interesting things that you may not know. If you use this DHA, we use modified PPP procedures, which means, so if I'm filling a job, I have to clear the PPP. That means any person in the PPP could block my selection. But if you're filling a job and you use this DHA, then only people in the PPP that are facing immediate separation, they're the only ones that could block your selection. So everyone else in the PPP wouldn't block your selection. So it's modified. It's a benefit. Also, the ICTAP and the RPL are waived. Those are priority programs that can block a selection. They're waived when you use this DHA. And I'm sure you're familiar with the 180-day waiting period. That's the waiting period that applies to our retired armed forces members. Right when they get out of the service, they're retiring, they're getting out. There's a 180-day waiting period before you can appoint them. Not if you use this DHA. It's waived. So again, this DHA has more flexibilities built into it than any appointing authority I've ever seen. And it's temporary. In fact, it expires in 5 years. So that's another reason you should be using it as much as you can, because if we can't show year upon year that we're using it, actively using it, it's going to look like we don't need it. And then Congress is going to be a lot less likely to continue to approve the extensions that they've been so gracious to continue to give us. So anyways, yes, there is an OPM direct hire authority for cyber positions. And I do hear about people wanting to use that DHA, but I'm here to tell you, just because the word cyber is in the name, don't use it. It's very restrictive and it's a terrible DHA. The OPM DHA is a terrible DHA. All right, I'm going to move on to the next one. Okay, creative staffing. These are just some things that are a little bit less known to people. For example, referral bonuses. Not everyone knows that the Department of Navy does have a policy that allows for referral bonuses. And the thing is cyber people know cyber people. It's interesting, just like in the HR world, we know other HR people. So talk to your best employees, talk to your former employees, and ask them to find you and refer candidates. Your best employees will almost always find you better employees than you can find yourself. And since you have your DHA, you'll be able to appoint them pretty immediately. Reemployed annuitant. I think most people know about reemployed annuitant, but it's a tool if you have a critical gap or you have an unfortunate imbalance and you have a lot of entry level and not a lot of expert level. You can bring in a reemployed annuitant for mentoring. It's a great tool. You should use it. My office is using it right now, and I can't tell you how beneficial it is to have a reemployed annuitant on staff mentoring 3 of our more entry-level employees. Resume mining. So currently USA Jobs is sitting on 1.5 million resumes, and they're searchable. You can go in and you can keyword search these resumes. You can search by geographic location. You can search by keyword. You can search, what else can you search by? I can't recall all the different ways you can search, but we used to have a rule in the Department of Navy that only HR professionals like myself could get a resume mining account, but that rule changed last year. So now hiring managers can ask for and get a resume mining account. So if you're struggling to fill positions or find quality candidates, go to your HRO and ask for a resume mining account. This is open and available to you now. Candidate inventory, I almost didn't put candidate inventory on the slide because we haven't started it yet. This is brand new. You're hearing it here first, folks. Candidate inventory is this new tool that we're going to start next month. We're going to pilot this tool next month. And this tool allows hiring managers in the Navy to select candidates from certificates issued to other hiring managers in the Navy. So let's think about that for a second. So think about the last cert you got. The average cert in the Navy has 20 names on it. I mean, we have small ones, we have big ones, but the average has about 20 names on it. And most hiring managers select one name. So that means for every certificate that we issue, 19 great candidates are left on the table. And the Office of Civilian Human Resources, we issue over 100 certificates a day. So that's a lot of people that were certified on a cert saying you could hire this person, but they weren't selected. So we're setting up a system where after the hiring official makes their selection, so don't worry if this is starting to make you nervous, you still get first pick of your own certificate. But after the hiring manager is done and they've selected their person, we're going to take that cert with those 19 other people that didn't get selected and make it available to everyone else. So you don't have to go through the process of asking for an announcement and doing the assessment questionnaire and waiting for your announcement to close and then waiting for the cert to be issued. You can just go in and look at the certs that have already been issued and select anybody that wasn't selected before. We think this one's going to be a game changer, and the pilot starts next month. It's not for every command. I think who's in the pilot? The pilot includes Naval Intelligence Activity, the Secretariat, ONR, Packed Fleet, but not the shipyards. Everybody else in Packed Fleet, a couple others. So talk to your HRO if this sounds like something that interests you. And then upward mobility. I don't want to go too deep into upward mobility. I'll suffice it to say, there could be people in your command that aren't in the 2210 field, that aren't in IT, but would love to go into IT, but they don't want to take a pay cut to do so. You can create an upward mobility program where you can move people from other areas into IT and give them pay retention so they can learn IT. You can develop your own employees and they don't have to lose any pay. Okay, cyber accepted service. So we've got to talk about cyber accepted service. So OPM regulates Title V is regulated by OPM. So that's me and most of you. So that's the regular GS pay scale. That's Title V. But Title 10 is regulated by the DoD. So within Title 10, they created a new personnel system, cyber accepted service, and it is similar but different. So for example, and the list of things I put on the slide is not all inclusive. I'm just trying to touch some key areas. They did eliminate time and grade, and they did eliminate the requirement to announce on USA Jobs. So that's cool. Modified a few things like probationary periods and vet preference. They still exist in cyber accepted service. They're just different. But then it kept other things as is, like performance management, exactly the same. Discipline, adverse actions, exactly the same. Same benefits. So it's, so I said similar but different. So currently in the Department of Navy, we only have 2 major commands that are in cyber accepted service, but we've had interest from others. And up until kind of recently, there was a freeze from DoD that said we couldn't even entertain converting anybody else into the cyber accepted service, but that freeze was lifted. So we can convert new people into the cyber accepted service now. So I've been partnering with my friends in the Don CIO office or dotted line to the Don CIO office to put together the package that you'll need to put together and the authority memo so that commands who want to start putting some people into cyber accepted service can. So I would say we're very close on finishing that. I will say that the final approving authority for this, for conversion, is our Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Civilian Personnel, Mr. Verducci. And I think we're really just weeks away from his signature on a memo that would open the door for this for you. Some of those popular benefits of cyber accepted service, obviously the targeted local market supplement. In some areas, the TLMS is very large and very attractive, and that's probably the thing that everyone talks about the most. The second most popular benefit is really the direct to public on the spot hiring that you're allowed to do in the cyber accepted service. However, as I mentioned before, and I'll mention it again, as long as you're using your DoD direct hire authority for certain personnel, you have the ability to do the same thing. That direct hire authority allows you to do the same direct to public on the spot hiring that they can do in cyber accepted service, at least for another 5 years. And that brings me to my last slide. Told you I could talk fast. So a real quick overview of the differences between in the IT world. So we have our Title V IT positions, our regular GS, and then we have our Title X CES. Some similarities: as long as you're using that DHA, you both can announce, you both can recruit without using USA Jobs. You can announce in other places. You can be creative. You can put announcements on your command website. You can put announcements on LinkedIn or anywhere. ICTAP and RPL are waived for both. On-the-spot job offers are allowed for both. But here's some key differences. Those modified PPP procedures I told you about for the DHA, that doesn't exist in cyber accepted service. When you're in CES, just for full disclosure, you should know you will have to use full PPP procedures like me. The 180-day waiting period being waived when you use the DHA in Title V, that does not apply in Title X CES. In fact, you can't use that DHA for CES positions. So there's a big difference there that you should be aware of. If you're in CES, the 180-day waiting period is applicable. And then, of course, the last big difference is we have locality pay and special salary supplements in Title V, whereas Title X has local market supplements and the much larger targeted local market supplements. And that is the end of my presentation. We got through it. And I think I will stop sharing now. So did I go over? I'm sorry, I tried.
We just had one question from the chat is, does a 180-day waiting period apply to officer enlisted for the cyber workforce? The question again was, does the 180-day
Are there
waiting...
questions in here?
Oh, she's not here yet.
Do you want me to answer the questions? I assume you're on a tight time schedule.
Hey, Dawn, we've got one question from the chat, and it was, does the 180-day... Can you hear us?
Oh, hello? Yes, I heard somebody.
Can you hear me, Dawn?
I can.
Oh, okay, all right, thank you. We just have one, question in the chat, and if I can remember, it was, does the 180-day apply to officers and enlisted? Was that? For the cyber work.
It does. The 180-day waiting period apply. Yes, it does apply. It does.
It does apply to officers and enlisted. Okay.
Yes.
We've got one more question here in the room.
Yes, hi, it's Lauren Fleming. I was wondering, these programs, where does that funding come from? Does it actually come from the command's money, or is this money that's tapped into? Because it seems like when we talk to HR, they seem to say, well, we're not doing that here. Is that allocated to the command, or how does the funding work for these programs?
Well, I think it just depends. So did you have a particular program in mind? So are you talking about like the incentives?
Yeah, any of the programs that you discussed, did those go, where is the funding coming from?
Yeah, so for the incentives, that does come out of your command budget. So your command that yeah, your command has to budget for that the year before. They have to set aside money for incentives, and it's true. Some commands don't. That's why if you're in a position to advocate, you should advocate. You should be planning ahead for the next year. And if you're being told no, you have no incentive money now, start talking about next year's budget. There most everything you do have to fund within your command. I mean, there are a few things that are centrally funded. Like what's centrally funded? I think the um, the the cyber the cyber programs that Dawn Cottrell manages for you guys, and you know those emails that you get from her, like the DoD Cyber Scholarship. That
Yes.
that is centrally funded by DoD, but those are rare. It's
Right.
rare where it's funded by somebody else.
Thank you.
We got one more question or comment.
Sure.
More of a comment, but Don, thanks for everything you're doing. This is Mark Gorak from DoD CIO. So just one point of clarification on CES, you can get TLMS, and on top of TLMS, you can get your recruiting or 3R bonuses. And that is based
Yes,
on
that is true.
that is based on the TLMS rate, not on just base pay. So it's exponential there.
It is exponential. I wasn't going to bring that up.
Second, please, I'm waiting for the use case. In DoD CIO, I have the authority to give up to 50% for the 3Rs. So I'm waiting for someone to give me a packet. I will most likely approve it. So that is down to DoD CIO, not OPM.
Nice.
And then I think the third thing I was going to mention for funding, right? TLMS is a must-pay bill. I dictate to each of the services how much to budget 2 years out, and they have all told me they're budgeted through 26. So whether they are or not, I do not know, but they've told me they are. Okay, now it's a big central pot of civ pay dollars. It comes out of there. 3Rs are a local budget. Most of the services are preparing funds to actually budget for that. I will submit to you, any budget people in here, with TLMS, cyber workforce, your base rate is higher than your normal civilian pay rate. So please take that in consideration when you do your budgets. Cyber workforce is going to cost more. So I'm trying to communicate that. Anybody who can help me do that, great, because if you do that base rate wrong, you will be short in year of execution. And then the third point I'll just make, we are short in cyber. We budget for higher than that shortage of authorizations. So there is a money available within that budget. So I would push that to your resource managers, that if I'm short 10% and I budget for 92%, that's a 2% surplus, if you will. As a budget guy, I know exactly what I do with that money, but the money is there and it's made for that purpose. So please execute the 3Rs. In a year, we've gone from, across the department, from 0.1% of our cyber workforce getting a 3R to what, 4% today? Just about 4%. 400% increase, that's great. I'd like to see that around 25, 30%. Okay?
Yeah, I agree. And then you make a great point about those staffing shortfalls, because we do that as well in HR when we find ourselves, so we budget for being fully staffed. I can't remember if we've ever been fully staffed. You can use that money. Another thing, you mentioned the retention incentive, which is excellent. You could also do the same thing with student loan repayment as a form of a retention incentive. So student loan repayment is, you're not limited to a new hire. You could actually offer to do that for a current employee. If you've got money left over, you could do that as well. But yeah, thank you for all your comments. Correct.
Dawn, we've got one more.
Good morning, Don Alpha Rodriguez. Good to hear you again. Glad to see you.
Hey! Hi.
If you're looking for a job, give us a call. No,
No, Dawn, not allowed. Speaking
Don,
of incentives.
So Don, can you quickly summarize that, now that I have my boss sitting here, what roadblocks are you having to CS expansion outside the Don level? So once it passes the SecNav, especially with us up here at CIO and PNR, where we can engage Civ Coldred, where are you getting blocked at? Because once it leaves the Don, we think it should be a 2 to 3 week time for approval, but we can't help it if we don't know what the roadblocks are at the OSD level.
The roadblocks for what? For CES conversion?
Yes, to getting the next beyond Fleet Cyber, and I forgot the other the two commands. Yeah.
I don't think we have any roadblocks. We've just been working on the memo for Mr. Verducci to sign, and we've been finalizing the checklist. So I don't think we have any roadblocks. Like I said, I think we're just a few weeks away. We've just been negotiating because there was a lot of eyes on this memo and a lot of eyes on the checklist, and everyone had an opinion. That slows things down a little bit.
As soon as it leaves the Don, please let us know. We want to see this use case.
Okay, I will email you personally.
Thank you. And second point on the 3Rs, and we need to get you an Avon account. We can show you, we're tracking every 3R incentives, and you can easily query by the Navy to see each of those incentives and how much it's being paid by work role.
Oh, nice.
All right.
Nice to see you again.
Nice.
Dawn, thank you so much. We truly appreciate this. And I just wanted to mention that Dawn has also created a HR, they call it a CHR fact sheet on the cyber workforce. A lot of that information is in here in the agenda that you guys have, as well as posted to our Navy portal and the OCHR as well. So Dawn, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, see you soon.
All right, and next up, we're gonna go on over to the NAVCs. View from the command, they've gone through a core inspection, so we'll have Miss Melissa Chang come on up. Is it not in the right format?
Good morning. I am Melissa Chang, and I actually am at Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard in IMF. I am the IT talent manager, branch manager, and the CWF PM, and occasionally I act as a NAVC inspector. So that's my introduction. Oh, I see.
I think this is what's going on. Yep, they're still presenting here. Let me just close this out. There we go.
Okay, thanks. No? So we went through our Cora in last August 2024. But before that, in March 2024, our command requested a site assist visit, and that's basically like a pre-Cora visit. So the inspectors came in and they went through the Cora inspection in a general way, and I met with an inspector, and they did a partial assessment of my program, and we passed fine. So I thought I was good. Anyway, so we went through that, and I guess lessons learned from that was make sure, like, because the 8140 came out last year and commands are still struggling to go through it and transition, I really wanted to say that it's really important that you participate in the CWF PM discussions online. I think it's bi-weekly meetings. And then identify your CWF counterparts, create those relationships in that CWF community, because others will help you learn through the changes and how to implement things. Like I've only been with the shipyard for 6 years, so through those relationships that I built with the CWF community at the other shipyards, that really helped me understand the old and then transition and then the new stuff. So I think relationships are very important. And then so having gone through the SAV and other audits before that, I think it's really important that you know your current state and you understand what your CWF membership is, who's fully compliant, who's not, what do they need to achieve to accomplish full compliance, and then organize your CWF compliance status to facilitate inspector discussions. I've done an audit before, and they had everything on SharePoint, which was great, but as a remote virtual inspector, I wasn't able to see that, so they actually had to like PDF everything and send it over to me, which works. So you just have to decide how you're gonna share your information with the inspector. And then just know your ongoing initiatives, what you're working towards to improve your program. That's very important. Like for us, it's PD description updates. So you really have to work with HRO because they don't always understand what the requirement is, and you just have to sort of work with them and get their feedback and back and forth. And then make sure you're prepared to implement future initiatives with the DoD instructions, the 5239 and so forth. And so again, you have to know your membership, know your members. In my command, we have some engineers that are now fall into the CWF program. And so now I have to educate those hiring managers or those branch managers on what the requirements are. Like I have ComSec and some engineers. So that's a challenge too. We have external commands. We support PDG, Pearl Harbor Naval Detachment Guam, and AUKUS. AUKUS is a challenge because they're not American citizens and they're trainees, so we're working through that as well. And then my other challenges are like military. We don't really have any military in my program, so it's interesting because in TWIMS I do. So trying to contact those people is really difficult. So I'm looking for information for that and working towards that. And then to prepare for your CORA, I don't think it's called CSCA questionnaire anymore, but I think it's the CORA questionnaire. Just go through that and review all the CW related questions. I think in June it was 38 items to validate. In the SAV, we only had to take a sampling, provide a sampling, but at CORA, the inspector required me to show 100% for every item. So that was a challenge. And then again, how are you gonna share that information with the inspector? SharePoint, TWIMS, reports, spreadsheets, etc. I was called into a conference room and I had to show it on the screen and I had to go through everything through a committee. So, but that might not be our case. My CWF membership is relatively small, like 110 or so. And then there's the questionnaire. And to prepare for the CORA, I used the questionnaire and I put comments on the last column, and so I could go through it and I could actually talk through it rather quickly with the inspector, and it looked like I was organized, even though I might not have been. And then last thoughts, same like here, don't be nervous, just be methodical, go through it. Inspectors are like you, learn from the process. I was asked to be an inspector at one point and I was quite nervous because I was like, I don't know this program, I've only been doing it for 3 years. But I went through that and it actually helped me understand the process. The IG inspector was very helpful and people like Anna Ashba was extremely helpful to me, and always ask questions. That's all. And thank you. Mahalo.
Hi, so you were mentioning, is this on? I guess
Yeah.
very short. The PM, you have the CWF PM meetings every 2 weeks. Is that just your command
That's
with your
S-
S2, or is that your
S2.
NAVC, or who is it with?
It was
The monthly one?
yeah, it's the S2. It's actually a monthly meeting that
Okay.
we have, the NAVC sync. where-
NAVC, okay,
Yes.
yeah. I'm NAVAIR, so we don't have those. But I have, and this isn't necessarily directed just towards you, but maybe some other CWF PMs. We have, we went from 500 people to almost 2,000 now that we're tracking at my command, and it's pretty much just me. And I'm concerned about our upcoming, used to be CCRI, I think it's now Cora, right? Same
Yes.
thing, because I've been through it before, but not in this position. And with our letters being so limbo, like for example, our contractor letters are still PDF, but our civ letters are now in waypoints mostly. Our PAAs, PDF for contractors, but now we're moving them up into waypoints, and then some are in TWIMs. And I guess my question is, I'd like to know if other CWF PMs are having those kind of issues, and maybe form some kind of communities we could support each other, know what you guys are doing. I'd love to get some information from other CWF PMs, if maybe at the end you guys want to stop by and see me and share our emails. I know I'm a different command, but I think we could still support each other, and I just like to get some tips and see what you guys are doing. And I'm just worried about also, if you guys know when these inspections happen, how I'm really worried about it, because I don't think we're going to have 100% having to pull through so many different sources, and also with being in limbo with our enhanced user agreements. A big part of our community is now software developers, which is another reason our community more than doubled. And our software developers were previously allowed to have those EUAs, and now when we have this inspection, I don't know if that's going to be acceptable or not. I have lots of other questions, but those are my main ones that I've been thinking about lately, keeping me up at night.
Well, let me evangelize for you real quick, because you know I love to evangelize for you. So Josh's going to come up here and tell you about the S2 call. The Navy team, right, has a lot of outreach. Okay? And so if you have those questions, especially here at NAVAIR, I think we know, there's a person you should probably go ask at NAVAIR to start with.
She's very helpful.
Perfect. And then if there's something going on beyond that, then the community is there. The community that has been built by the Navy is there to support and everything. So what we need to get you into, we need to make sure you're in that community and you're getting that communication. But Josh, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say, specific to software development and things of that nature, I just met with Fleet Cyber, and as the previous Fleet Cyber OCA lead right here, who's no longer there, and the now team knows, they're not inspecting to 8140 when it comes to the other elements, right? It's the elements that they have released qualifications towards, specifically for foundational and things of that nature. So they are well aware that we have a waiver with DoD to operate under the SECNAV 5239. So they are still looking at the stuff that we have not received qualifications from on the other OPRs yet towards the 5239 series, right? Hopefully that answers part of your question on the software, any of the AI, any of the data, those types of individuals that it sounds like you guys might have. Okay.
I would also add that the contractors are still under 8570, so they don't need new LODs because they should be what was appropriate for the 8570. It is only when the new DFARS clause comes out that we need to move them to the 8140. And well, I know when they do the core, they typically will look at every contractor that has privilege access first, line by line, go through every single one of those, but they should be reflecting the 8570 LODs. So they start out with all the contractors with privilege access, and then they move to the civilians with privilege access, since those are the highest risk, and they'll go line by line, but we want to make sure your contractors are under the 8570. So hopefully those will, will stay in place, and I'm not sure if NavAir has their contractors under waypoints, but the majority of DON does not. So TWIMS is our readiness database, and that's where those LODs should be held at that point for the inspection.
Does anybody know if when they audit the PAAs, if they're going to be looking in waypoints or TWIMs, or because right now we're uploading it in both?
Yes. Yes.
Well, I think NavAir, just for everybody else, they're doing a pilot program in waypoints.
Correct.
That is not the case for all the other Syscoms and TICOMs. It is only NavAir, so that might be a little confusing to you why she keeps saying waypoints when the rest of us aren't using it that way. It is a pilot, but TWIMS is still our system of record.
Correct.
For the cyber workforce readiness.
Yeah, and thusly why we say yes when you ask, are they going to look at waypoints or in TWIMS? It's like, yes, because you're running a pilot and you have them in both, so you're going to need to look in both in order to be able to show your work there at NavAir.
So as Josh alluded to, I'm the former OCA lead. When I was leading the team, I told them, hey, we're in conversation, so definitely speak out to the inspector ahead of time, communicate what you have, what you're going to show them, so there's no surprises on site. As long as that conversation starts early and often, even outside of the usual sync meetings, you're probably going to be okay. But you got to communicate with them ahead of time what you have, and then they can tell you, hey, this isn't right? I always called it, I just call balls and strikes, but I'll help you gauge the strike zone. I'm not going to tell you how to hit, but I will help you figure out if you're in the right area. Right.
Okay. Yeah, and definitely make sure, so you have Anna Eschbaugh, Emily Gahn, Josh Wright. Make sure, get on email, reach out to them, and help to build into that community that they have built. It really is really good. It just is very good. So, and they will help out with anything possible. Yes, sir.
So I like the fact that you actually have this program. My question is, can we incorporate a lower level of quality control of our organizations using a program like this to specifically adjudicate who is in what work role, and is that correct? And whose job is it to do that?
Well, so I think that alludes to the reason we have local cyber workforce program managers, which again, not every other service has. So the local cyber workforce program manager at the command should be doing that, and they are supposed to be the central point to work with the HR folks, the manpower folks, to make sure the coding gets corrected in the authoritative systems. They're supposed to work with the supervisors. So they are not, as we heard yesterday, they are the centerpiece, but they are not the one doing everything, right? You gotta actually work with the folks. The supervisor has the billet, has the requirement, as the PD, right? They enlist the help of the CWF PM locally, which is managing that program on behalf of the commanding officer at the command, who should be doing that at the command. I will say also that OCA, as far as inspections goes, is one of the higher tiers of inspection within the Navy. There are other lower tiers of inspection that happen across, like TAV teams. There are TICOM inspections, and there's some other, IWTG is another one, which I can't remember what it stands for. So there are other checks and balances ahead of going up to a CORA that are taking place.
Okay, thanks, sir. Okay, so great brief, and I would like to thank Melissa and Juan for being Navy personnel who come up here, get up on this stage, which ain't easy, and being able to provide a presentation to tell you how things are happening at their level. They are executing, right? This is how you learn these things, and then you get to bring out great questions because you're like, I'm gonna go through this, right? So you get to hear from the ground and not necessarily always from us here. And everybody understands that I love to talk. So as you notice, there was not even one brief, well, it was over there, but there was not one brief in here by me. But there, like I said, there was a couple from Navy commands who came in, right, to talk about what they're doing. I am proud to have the first Marine Corps command come in and give a brief at the summit. This is fantastic. We had a couple volunteers that came in, and we got one person that was able to do it. And so, without further ado, I will introduce the ISSM at Mar4 PAC, Mr. Stacy Suji.
All right. Thank you, Derek, for that introduction. I think over the past couple days, we've learned a lot of what 8140 is. And I think there's a lot of challenges. And there are some things I think we're starting to realize what 8140 is not. And with the Marine Corps, we have a lot of challenges. But what I want to focus on today is trying to be productive with the 8140. And that's a tough thing to do in the Marine Corps, because what I'm going to really focus on is how do we take those problems and change them into opportunities. Because no one wants to deal with problems, but if I can tell you that we can get a positive out of that, people will start to listen. So with that, before we start, let me tell you a little bit about myself. So I work for Mar4 PAC at Camp Smith in Hawaii. I actually cover down on 3 different roles, but I have had some experience with the DoD, 15 years, specifically in the IA and cybersecurity section. I've worked for the Army at User PAC. This was back when they were converting from DITSCAP to DICAP, so I know the pain. I've worked for Navy as well, for Shipyard at Pearl Harbor, part of NAVSEA and Compact Fleet for about 5 years. And for the past 5 years, I've been working as the ISSM at Mar4 PAC, Marine Forces Pacific. In my current job, from the DCWF perspective, I cover down on 3 roles. So my primary role is at the Command ISSM. Secondary role, Cybersecurity Workforce, PM. Many of you covered down on that. And recently, from last year, I also assist Headquarters Marine Corps as Mar4 PAC SCA. So what that is really focused on the accreditation and authorization in a RMF ATO process. So I think having this visibility of various roles gives me a better view of some of the challenges and opportunities that we can get when we approach 8140. So that's what I want to talk about today. I have my contact there. I want you to take that down if you have any questions for me, because there's a lot of stuff I want to talk about, and 20 minutes isn't a long time to cover everything, so I'm going to try my best to get everything done. Okay, so on my agenda, what I want to be able to do is we want to be able to, I'm going to take a different approach. Rather than going into the nitty-gritty to say what we have to do as far as the requirements, like I said, with the Marine Corps, our focus is fight tonight, close the kill chain, and create effects. And that's a little hard when I just say, well, cyber workforce. That's going to get put down at the bottom of the list. If I cannot tell a good story to engage the leadership to understand why it's important, it's not going to get much traction. So through my presentation today, I want to give you some ideas on how I'm approaching it as the Mar4 PAC, ISSM, and Cyber Workforce Program Manager. So yeah, how do we turn those problems into opportunities? I'm going to give you a quick rundown because we already know all the specifics of 8140, but I want to just highlight what the requirements are, just briefly, because we already know it. Then I'm going to show you how we can take that information, look at the overall strategy, and build a good story around that to be able to identify what the requirements are. And I know that there's a lot of requirements with the timeline coming down the pipe, specifically to the cybersecurity workforce element. So I'm hopeful this might be useful for the audience. Okay. So what I have here is I just copied and pasted straight from the 8140, the purpose. I'm not going to read all the specifics, but what I've done as I go through, I've highlighted in yellow the key points. So as I build this story, the story has to be revolving around this. And as Mr. Fickle said, the primary focus is to set it's really a talent management program, right? It's to ensure that across the DoD, we have some criteria to ensure compliance as far as the workforce goes, right? So we've identified, we talked about the DCWF codes and things like that. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that. I want to get to the good stuff, right? We talk about all the requirements. So it's much more involved than 8570 was, which means there's going to be more work. as we found, right? So I think the first step that we should all take when we approach this, regardless of, especially if you're the cyber workforce program manager, is we hear the word agile a lot, right? So if you learn agile, you go through like a PMI's class, Agile Certified Practitioner, one of the things they teach you is to better understand, you have to build that story out, the agile story. So as a cybersecurity workforce professional, I need 8140 to, and I would ask people, fill in a blank. So listening to everyone here and the challenges, as my personal opinion, I would say I need 8140 to be able to exist in a environment where I have a tool to centralize, where I don't have to worry about the back-end data, managing multiple different processes for Marines, civilians, and contractors, because that takes away the time that I need to spend to help make the program more effective, looking at the qualifications. That's my wish list. But let me ask you this. If you ask those individuals, so as in my other roles, I'm an ISSM, I'm a SCA, Security Control Assessor. If you ask somebody in one of those workforce roles and say, well, you know, as a ISSM, what does 8140 mean to you? You're probably gonna get a long pause, right? I don't know, I've got too much things to do to think about those kind of things. So again, that's why we need to build that story so that it's relevant to them. Now, if you ask them, what kind of problems do you have? I'm sure they're gonna give you a whole list of things, too much to mention, okay? So that's what I wanna be able to focus on. But before we get to building that story, there's a little bit more on the structure, and we know about that because that's adding more complexity. When there's more complexity, you need more time, and you need to be more effective. I'm gonna skip to that so that we got a little bit more time. The SECNAV 5239, the final draft was due just the other day, and I believe it's being published. I took some of these interesting excerpts from them. Again, so we know the 8140 is setting the criteria, it's setting up the compliance requirements, but the SECNAV 5239 is kind of putting the meat on the bones of that framework, right? It's saying that we need to align to the DON cybersecurity strategy, total force structure, position. We saw within TWIMS, that's where the information is gonna be. And then there is that section about effectiveness, right? We've got those metrics. We saw how the dashboards are being put together, and that's awesome, that's great. But it's kind of high level. So when you go down to the unit or the command level, you're putting in a lot of effort. But when I look at what we have, does it help from the Marine Corps perspective? Does it help me generate effects? So that when we talk to the ISSMs and the others, right, if they're putting in a lot of this effort for additional training, tracking this, tracking that, there needs to be a feeling that there is a reason for this, right? So how do we articulate that? Because they're not gonna be invested in getting things done if they don't see what's in it for them, unfortunately, right? And then I got one more last thing at the bottom there. That's my favorite because that's my job role code 722. It says, shouldn't be a collateral duty. But we know that situation because the Marines, as well as those in the Navy, we gotta modify our work to be able to use the resources that we get. So I know someone else mentioned, yeah, the MOS don't match up. So as we go and we grab all and gather all this information, I see that there's inconsistencies. But again, the reason why those inconsistencies exist is because we're trying to be agile to get the job done. So now you gotta try to figure out, Cyber Workforce PM, how do I make that come together and facilitate a positive outcome? So I put this on here because time is your enemy, right? So we know next month you should have already completed your cyber workforce residential requirements for the cybersecurity workforce element. And I believe for the Marine Corps, we're all done.
Foundational, yes.
Foundational,
yes.
Right. 1 year from now, we have to do the residential. And we heard a great coverage of how that can be done. So in my discussion today, the story that I want to be able to help you understand and how I'm creating this to be able to address that residential requirement that's due next year, February, is going to be focused around the cybersecurity workforce element specific to my area of expertise, which is the A&A process, the RMF process, right? And most people, even when you listen to some of the discussions around, most people don't take kindly to the A&A process. But I'll talk about that more in just a bit. So to make sure that we can make that connection to the top leadership, what I first start with is understand, okay, at the highest level in the Marine Corps, from the Commandant, we have a Frago 01-2024, and his focus was the term maintain momentum. And he has several key focal points that he has instructed us to address, which is balancing crisis, response, and modernization, naval integration, that's MAR4PAC's #1 focus, and organic mobility, quality of life, recruit, make, and retain Marines. Sounds like there's a lot of 8140 in there. And maximize the potential of reserves. So with that, a lot of times you have to do some reading. So the way I interpreted it and what I did was, and we'll see that in a bit, a lot of that, like I said, I'm going to take the problem of the ATO issues and I'm going to try to wrap it around that strategy so I can tell the story that's going to make sense to someone at the leadership at the top level. So a lot of times, the ATO process, it's cumbersome, it's slow, it's frustrating. When you look at that guy off to the left, those are the people that come to you at the last minute saying, where's my ATO, ISSM, make it happen. I'm not concerned about why it didn't get done. I need it to complete the mission, right? And the perception that a lot of people have with the ATO process is it's a roadblock. We're focused on too much trying to get things right, which could be furthest from the truth. When I hear people say, well, you know, the ATO process is more compliance. When I hear that, I say, well, you ain't doing it right. Because when they talk about cybersecurity, cybersecurity is a component of the ATO process. But the purpose of the ATO process is to help the command make good decisions based on risk management. That's why the DoD instruction 8510.01 is entitled Risk Management Framework. It's not called Cybersecurity Framework, it's risk management. It encompasses a full holistic view of security and privacy controls in general. So when we say, well, it's not that important, it's just like going into your operational environment without any intel, right? You need to know what your capabilities, if they're secure. And taking into that account, that's the problem I'm going to have our story focus on. To tie into 8140, specifically how we can address residential qualifications to be able to make sure we reach that deadline next year, February 2026, okay? So, again, trying to map those goals of what the Commandant of the Marine Corps said, hey, there are these set points I need us to focus. You know, the current state with the ATO, people are overwhelmed. Could be a workforce issue, could be a knowledge issue, hard to say. If you're not capturing the metrics, how do you know you're going to fix the right thing? We could also have challenges with the recruitment and retainment of the Marines, just like we just heard with the HR. In my current AOR, my counterpart ISSMs across the MAR4PAC AOR, a lot of them have only stayed for 1 year. We rely on the Marines. The Marines rotate out on a regular basis. So once I get someone up to speed, my challenge is now I have to restart all of that all over again. But don't worry, I got something we're going to cover down on that when we talk about the residential training. Our most concerning issue is balancing crisis response and modernization. So we are, the Marine Corps, we're in the process of trying to modernize the entire environment. But again, that creates some challenges, right? So how do you balance the crisis with the need to fight tonight and still make sure that our systems are safe? It's a tough balancing act, right? And then at the end, maximize the potential for the reserves. You always come into a situation where you don't have enough people. So what are you going to do about it? You still got to get the mission done. And a lot of times, we got to think about how we can leverage the resources that we have based on what we have to get the job done. So what I put together here is I use that PPT format, not PowerPoint, but people, process, and technology. I kind of mapped the who, the what, the how. And as they overlap in terms of this Venn diagram, right? We've got some other components which introduce stability, innovation, automation, which all ties into the overall strategy. Because from the Commandant's guidance, the purpose is maintain the momentum. He specifically said that no one requirement is more important than the other. It's a balancing act, right? So when I look at this, this is the way we get to success or to convince the powers that be that 8140 is important. We need to make sure we hit all those things that are relevant to higher command, okay? Quality of life, naval integration. So basically, this is just a visual representation of what I just mentioned there. We'll come back to this a little later. But again, this is all in line with maintaining the momentum as far as the Commandant is concerned, right? So target outcomes. I'm just going to list them all down. You know, I have a project management background, so whenever we do something, what is the objective, right? We hear a lot about KPIs, key performance indicator, but what we're trying to track needs to have a specific objective, right? So you could say, hey, optimize the organization's total force, which kind of goes back to TWIMS, but what we want to do is be able to tailor that to address the concerns and the problems with the ATO process. So this is important because, like we said, there's things that the 8140 is, which is a talent management program. But if you go to the DoD Cyber Exchange and you go to the 8140 page, which is the authoritative source, you look in the FAQ section, there's a line in there that has something to the extent that the 8140 establishes the talent management, but does not designate where those roles and how they are used. It's up to the component, the command, or the unit, right? So this is where we have to make that connection as the CWF PM to be able to articulate, okay, we're putting all this effort into develop the workforce to show that they're proficient, but then we have to make that connection to show how it's creating the effects, the value to the mission. So that's where I'm tying in the ATO portion to do that. So you might ask, okay, how do we do that? Okay, so I want to be able to address that 2026 requirements. Right, so we want to create KPIs on that. So the particular areas that I'm going to focus on through my explanation here, this covers about half of the cyber security workforce element. But you notice I identified some others that are dependent because in actuality, there's overlap across all of the workforce elements. But for this situation here, I'm just going to focus on one area related to the ATO process, right? You have the authorizing official, the AO, the SCA, Security Control Assessor, the validator, the ISM, the ISO, and the ISI, right? The ISI is the Information System Security Engineer. But there are dependent roles that also support that. Talk about that a little later. So now that we got the scope for that, what I've done here is I've pulled the specific explanation for residential qualification per the 8140. And you notice I've highlighted the must, which implies it's a requirement. Okay, it's kind of interesting, right? So it must cover all the pertinent tasks per the KSAs, KSATs, content that are applicable to the role. So it's going to take some time because as a PM, you got to rely on other people, the supervisor, to help figure out what those proper KSATs are, right? Include a formal period of supervised engagement. Now, this is the biggest challenge right here. As the PM, that means you gotta go out and you gotta do a lot of talking, and if you got hundreds of people, that's a big effort. That's why they say primarily the cyber workforce PM should be a full-time position, if possible, right? There was some changes to that, because that's a lot of work. Maintain, and also must be maintained and documented by the OSD and DoD component. That's a tough one, right? You think each supervisor is gonna go and document all of that? But again, if you think back to what the DoD strategy was, it really was to say, create a standardized environment across the enterprise, okay? So I want you to keep that in mind. So how do we meet that? That's a tough requirement to meet. But what's interesting at the bottom is, and I think, you know, the way they worded it, they didn't say must use performance-based assessment, it says may, which means it's up to you. But here's my challenge to you. If you're not taking metrics, those KPIs, key performance indicators, based on the problem, how are you gonna know if you're experiencing issues or if what you're trying to do is actually creating effects, creating value for the mission? So from my perspective, if you don't change that may to a must, you're gonna be spinning your wheels, right? And you don't want to get people all into doing this, and at the end of the day, your boss comes and he says, hey, Stacy, we've implemented this, how did it help us? Or, you know, our workforce is trained, it's qualified, but how come we're not getting things done, right? So this extra measure of performance is critical for you to help answer that question, right? Maybe you got everyone trained, but they weren't allocated to the right mission sets. So how do you make sure that gets done? I'm glad you asked that question. So, like I said, I'm trying to set this up so that it's focused on the authorization and accreditation process, the ATO process, RMF. And like I showed you from that diagram earlier, we need to make sure, requirement number one is that we identify the relevant KSATs, right? So I went through the first one at the top, the AO, AODR, authorizing official. I'm not gonna read through everything, but that's the description. When I look through their core KSATs, or specifically the task, because that's what we can measure and we can track. It's very easy for that person, that's the person at the executive level. And there's established acceptable limits for the software and application networkers. Bottom line, that's the person who defines what the risk tolerance is, right? It's not technical, right? How do you measure risk and what is allowed or what is not allowed? The SCA, that's one of the positions I fill. We go through and we help develop that risk assessment to make the recommendation to the AO. So based on the SCA, which is a DCWF code 612, I've gone through and I've identified those core requirements, okay? Now, I won't go in depth as to what it is, but again, this is how I'm meeting that initial must-have requirement for residential training, okay? Vulnerability assessment analyst. This is where I looked at the KSATs, and I believe this would be the best fit for someone who's in that validator position. It has a specific tasks identified. Okay, again, I'm setting up the, making sure that we meet requirement one. So that's DCFW code 541. Okay, the most important one, 722, right? That's the one that carries the weight of the whole process. It shouldn't be that way, but it is what it is. That's the core KSATs. And again, I'm not gonna go through all of that, but it's a very simple, short description. Responsible for the cybersecurity program, the organization, and the system or the enclave. Depending, there's various types of ISSMs, okay? But bottom line, if you're an ISSM, you probably are gonna need to be able to meet those core task requirements, okay? The ISI, this is the person who should be implementing the controls. A lot of times they make the ISIL do it. And this is one I think that's very not well understood, but I think this is good because, again, this is defined not only in Marine Corps policy, but it is a role that's defined in the Navy policy. The Navy has a very good documentation of their authorization and accreditation, the RMF Process Guide from the Navy. Very well written. I like it. As the Marine Corps moves to naval integration, our intent is to be able to try and mirror that as close as possible. But again, here's what the ISI should be doing. So when the package moves slow, and if the ISI is the one that's responsible for doing the bulk of the controls, implementing, testing, verifying, if I don't have anyone doing it, yes, could be a problem why the package moves slow. So it may not be a training issue, it's just maybe we don't have someone assigned to the roles to get the job done. Okay? So this is where I'm going to do a quick recap. Right? So those are the requirements that we just saw earlier to meet the residential qualification. And here's how this ATO process kind of fulfills that, right? So it must cover all pertinent KSATs, KSAs. I just showed you the basic roles that are part of that process. And here's the thing, that process should be the same across all of DoD. All DoD is required to go through the ATO process for all DoD systems, right? The RMF instruction is a requirement for all DoD components. Now, each component may do things a little differently, but the end result is still basically the same, right? So, task one, or requirement one, addressed. Remember, the big challenge was a supervised part. But here's the thing, the RMF process, there's multiple layers of supervision. So when I say supervision, couldn't that also mean oversight, right? So when the package is created, you have the ISM and the ISO. They start the package. They oversee the ISI, the one who implements the controls. They will check that to make sure that it's done properly. On top of that, there's another check on them. When the validator comes in at step 4, they're gonna check to make sure that they're doing everything. So you get that impartial validation of the package, okay? Then on top of that, once the validator's done, they're gonna submit a report to the SCA, my level, to state where they found the issues, if they have a POAM, did they do any mitigations. So then my review will then check the validator who checked the ISO and ISM, who was also checking the ISI, right? And the final check on me, once I make that recommendation, I write up the risk assessment and I send it to the AO or AODR for final approval. That's a check on me to make sure that I understood what the risk tolerance was and that everyone else below that is falling in line with what the acceptable risk is. So the cool part about this is something we should already be doing. And then soon, Marine Corps is moving into EMAS. We'll be in sync with everyone else. So it's just a matter of, hey, EMAS is already documenting all of this. All the people that work on that package have assigned roles, which corresponds to DCWF codes. And then the last part, right, must be maintained and documented by the OSD or DoD component. So we don't want to give people more work than they have. They already got too much work as it is. But when you look at the ATO and ANA process, one of the artifacts that is generated as part of getting your ATO is the SSP, System Security Plan. In that System Security Plan, you have all the stakeholders that are tied to that. And each of those stakeholders, guess what? There's a DCWF code tied to that. So now that's an official document tied in an official system that's managed by the component, and then the validation on top of that. If you did everything right, you got the ATO, which again is an official document, and I would say that would meet my requirement to say must be maintained and documented, because this is something that you got to redo and verify. There's continuous monitoring that's required if you're doing it right, but also the ATO serves as a verification from the topmost level that the workforce did what they needed to do in the way that they should be doing it, and there was oversight verifying every step of the way that the job was done according to the way it should have been done. Okay? almost done, then I'll open up for questions. So this kind of wraps it up with the, how we take that information, the situation, tell the story, right? So we started with, okay, I'm gonna have a hard time selling 8140 as just workforce, but I need to take that extra step. The one part that I missed, and you can ask me more questions later, is, remember I talked about the KPIs. So that's where we gotta start measuring what's going on in EMAS, right? And EMAS has the capability to do that. It has reporting services. You know, how many packages is the ISSM assigned to? Is there too many? Do I have the required resources already tied to the package? That's got to get documented in EMAS. Once we get that squared away and we better understand how much resources we need to allocate, because again, that's not the responsibility of 8140, it's the responsibility of the command or the unit. We better understand, yeah, we've got a good workforce, but maybe I'm not allocating them to the right packages, I'm not prioritizing them the right way. I will have the hard facts, numbers, to be able to show if we're able to achieve what we need to achieve to make sure we're generating effects. But this is just a basic retelling of what I just explained in a visual format. What I want to be able to leave you with is the keys to success. And I think some people have already hit on them. But ask why, right? If you don't know and understand the why, how are you going to build that story to make sense? You have to tie it to what makes sense to the leadership, what they understand, because most of them are not going to understand anything about cybersecurity or cyber. So we got to break it down, make sure we understand why. Make sure you do your homework. Read through all of the documentation, understand what is required, like we said, what is 8140 and what is it not? And what is my responsibility and what do I have to take to the next step to make sure it's successful? Team effort, like we were showing, I only focused on the cybersecurity workforce element, which is the current focus right now for everyone. But as we expand out over the next couple years, you're going to have to figure out how to bring those other workforce elements together. And I tell you, everything that there's a problem, you can look at the ATO process in this special publication 800 TAC 53. Anything and everything that you run into problems should be addressed through controls that exist in there. I guarantee it. If you know that, you can solve any problem. You just got to get the story right so that people work together as a team. Build bridges, don't burn them, right? A lot of times, especially when you work with IT people, they're really stubborn sometimes. I used to be one of them, so I know. They're very binary. They're either right or wrong, right? So you got to build that soft skill of good communication to, like I said, tell a good story so that they understand how it benefits them. If they see that you're trying to help them, why would they push back? Why would they attack you, right? Something to think about. And most importantly, without the metrics, right? If you're trying to manage, I can't manage anything if I can't measure it. I think somebody also brought that out. At the very end, I wanted to show you one of the key important tasks that's assigned to the ISSM, the 722 DCWF code. And it's interesting because it says, communicate the value of information technology, IT security throughout all levels of the organization stakeholders. Now, the interesting thing is I went through and I looked at that because when you look at the tasks, it's supposed to be like a building block, right? The tasks are driven by the abilities. Your abilities is based on the skills that you develop per the knowledge that you gain, right? So knowledge builds the skills, skills builds the abilities, and then that allows you to successfully complete the task. But when I look at through the ISSM, I think that's an area that we a lot of times fall short, the communication, the soft skill part. So that's why I'm bringing up tell the story, build the story, connect with the stakeholders or the audience. So in leaving with that, I want to leave an invitation open. Part of what I focus on, and this is a good segue if you need to do the IDP, because that's the last requirement that you have to do to be considered fully qualified, right? I didn't hear too much of that being talked about. So how I'm trying to approach mine is, I've been in Toastmasters for about a decade. Started back when I was at Pearl Harbor, and that's really helped me to define, make that connection, provide good feedback, and build that story to be able to help other people better understand what's being asked of them. And I think that would be a good IDP, continual development plan. So I'm trying to put together a community of interest. If you're interested, reach out to me or do a search on Camp Smith Toastmasters. We can do something virtually. If that's something you'd like to participate in, reach out to me. I'd be more than happy. And at the end of the day, I'm going to turn it back to Mr. Fickle. But in keeping with Mandel, good communication, this is the way. Pending any questions.
Thanks again, Mr. Suji. I'm gonna do the clap again. No. So when he first started talking about this, I was like, and then now seeing it and following along on the story, hey, the ATO is actually a way to be able to assess your folks to their residential qualifications. It makes total sense. It's like, yes, and then you can use EMAS or wherever you're keeping that documentation to be able to track residential qualification for your folks if they are the ones that are working within that ATO structure. So that's fantastic. Thank you for that presentation and bringing that to the clear there. And then also just out to the Marine Corps folks, if y'all are still online and everything, hey, first one, thank you, sir. First one for the Marine Corps. The expectation, thank you. Expectation is that maybe we have a couple more at the next summit from the Marine Corps. So I just had a couple things, and then Emily. So a lot of stuff we've talked about these last few days. One thing that was perfectly clear is people are the number one thing, and that we have to empower our people, and that there are programs throughout, right, that are there to empower people. Captain Pender said it. And she also said this is leadership work, right? So leadership needs to be able to be out there and start setting the standard for the culture that they're going to put in place. It's great if cyber can push it, but it should be across the entirety of your command and your mission that you are training and empowering your people to get the job done. And whatever those resources are that you need, understandably within the realm of how much resources you have, smartly using those resources to get your people where they need to be. It's fantastic. I love that every leadership person came up here, talked about people. And that's how we can just step off and be able to move forward. And then one more thing for me. No, I think that'll be good. I appreciate it. Emily?
Thank you, dear. Very well said. Very well said. Thank you all. I know we've gone over just a little bit. I think it was well deserved though, because I think these briefs were really important. I do want to take a couple minutes if you guys want to, if there's any questions or comments out there before we do the wrap up. Nothing? Okay. Well, I want to thank all of you very much for participating in this. I think this was another successful summit, our 2.5 out on the West Coast. Thank you for everybody participating virtually. This seems to work. I think we're doing great. Getting this out there, being able to work with you workforce PMs and stakeholders about this program, I don't want it to stop. I want us to keep this engagement. So stay tuned to Don IT East. That's coming up this summer. And the DoD Summit is in March. We will also have attendance there. We know there will be a specific session for the Navy and Marine Corps to brief. So that is coming up in March. We have the sign-up information available for that. And then stay tuned for our Don IT East Cyber Workforce Summit 3 coming up this summer. I want to take some time to say thank you to all of our briefers, all of our folks that came out here, shared your information about your command, DoD CIO, Mr. Gorak, Alfredo, Matt, Elliot, all of you, thank you guys for participating. It's very, very helpful for us to see DoD come in here and see we're opening up and showing you what Navy and Marine Corps program looks like. So we appreciate you guys taking the time. Thank you to all of our speakers, all of our briefers, to Mr. Ryder, our Chief Workforce Officer. He's done a great job with keeping this program going for us. And then to our team, Navy, Marine Corps, N2N60, 4 DCI, you guys, thank you. I appreciate it. Another successful one in the books. And then I do not want to forget this, and I hope he is still online and has not left. But Mr. Tony Martin, if you are out there, thank you for all of your service and dedication to the Cyber Workforce Program. Tony has been a domain Cyber Workforce PM out at NAVI for years. I refer to him as the godfather of the Cyber Workforce Program, and he is going to retire, and we will miss you. We will miss all of your knowledge, all of everything that you have done for this program. We truly appreciate you. Thank you to the tech support. We didn't have any crunching of the chips. We had success. Thank you. We appreciate it. So thank you all. If you guys have any questions after the fact, need to reach out. Our contact information is on the pamphlet. As well as if you're looking for the briefs or the recordings of this session, we will have those posted. I believe they're going to be on Don CIO's site, but we will also get them to our S2 workforce portal. And then we will send you out an email and let you know where they're at. We are tracking your attendance if you hadn't signed up for each of the days. As a whole, for attending Don CIO, you can get the continuous professional development credit for this. So we will be tracking the attendance for our sessions, and we'll send out a survey to let us know what we did great, what we can do better, and then looking forward to the next one. So thank you all very much. Did you have anything else? You good?